Hey you! Are you ready? Grab your pack, grab your tent, grab your gear. Jump in. We're going on an adventure. In Arizona, there's so much to see, so much to experience. At GCU, adventure is never too far away. Offering over 200 academic programs with a Christian worldview and nestled in the heart of Phoenix, you can earn your degree in fewer than 4 years and explore everything Arizona has to offer. Find your purpose at GCU. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu/AZ roadtrip.
From the Kansas City Sports Update Studios, welcome to Kingdom Radio, where we talk about all things Kansas City Chiefs. Brought to you by Arrowhead Update. Join Chris and Richard on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Player FM, CastBox, and all third-party applications. Check us out on Facebook platforms such as Kansas City Sports Update and Arrowhead Update. And if you cannot find us there, Google or search Kingdom Radio and Kansas City Chiefs, and you will find us. Welcome to the Kingdom. Kingdom.
How are we doing, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome to Kingdom Radio. I'm your host, Richard Smith, along with my senior NFL analyst and co-host, Chris Chavez. And tonight, we've got a lot of news to discuss. We want to talk a little bit about this, upcoming, divisional game, or divisional playoff game, with Kansas City Chiefs against the Houston Texans. And there's also a lot of head coaching news around the NFL, along with, there's just a lot of stuff going on in the NFL, and we're going to hop right into it tonight. Chris, how are you doing? What do you think of the show? You been doing all right lately?
Yeah, I've been doing good. Definitely been looking forward to this game to get back and watching some Chiefs football.
I'm telling you what, this bye week, kind of leaves us a little bit having some withdrawals of some Chiefs. And I will say, hey, I love the fact that we do have a bye week, in that first round of the playoffs. You see how important that is. Obviously, Tom Brady made his exit out early, which was great to see. And also Andy Reid coming off a bye week. We all know how that works, and I think it's going to play out in Kansas City's favor ultimately. So let's get right into that, Chris. We have the Houston Texans coming up, which is going to be a big game. It's going to be at home at Arrowhead Stadium. Give us a little preview of that. What should we look out for? What do the Chiefs really need to prepare for compared to our last meeting that we ultimately lost in the regular season?
So what we need to be prepared for is a lot of rushing. In the last game, they had 41 rushing attempts. Carlos Hyde had 26 of those, and he had a 116-yard game. If we can shut him down, I think that's going to really put pressure on Watson and his receivers to step up their game. And with our secondary, I feel like we're going to be able to control the long game. The only one that really is going to be a huge it factor for Houston is going to be DeAndre Hopkins.
Right.
And as we saw in this weekend's game, he can be covered going deep, but then late in the game, he switched up his routes to where he was coming across the middle, and that's where he got open. And so we're going to have to be prepared for that. If he's running down the field routes and not getting the ball because we're keeping him well covered, they're going to make an adjustment to get him running across the linebackers across the field, and they're going to be looking to get him open. So we just need to be prepared to shut that down.
And look, with Thornhill out for the playoffs, this is a more of an eye-opener than it typically would be. So, yes, the radar is absolutely going to have to be on Hopkins as well as Watson. And like you said, Hyde tore us apart. But our defense is a different animal since then. So I don't particularly worry about as many of the elements as we did in that first matchup. But at the same time, it doesn't hurt to be prepared for, anything they bring across the table. And look, Kenny Stills is still a threat as well. They've got some speed on that offense. And we also have to look out for the legs of Deshaun Watson. But I think this will be a big game for our defensive line. I think we're really going to get to Deshaun Watson all game. And it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Obviously, this is a must-win, a highly important game, in Chiefs franchise. So I highly look forward to this game, and we will discuss it more here, in the pregame show this coming up week. Another thing that I want to bring up about this is obviously J.J. Watt is a huge force on the defense, and we need to look out for him, in the pass rush against, Patrick Mahomes. But the plus side to that is look, and Chris, I'm sure this is no big news to you, but the Kansas City Chiefs seem to shut down every single premier pass rusher that comes across our table, and it's been really nice, to see us shut down the Von Millers, the J.J. Watts, and players like that. So do you think that we'll continue this trend, in this playoff scenario when everything is on the line, slowing down a player like J.J. Watt?
Yeah, we had a lot of success against him in the last game. He had a total of 2 tackles. One of them was a solo, no sacks, and he only had 1 QB hit. I think that we're going to be able to focus on him and shut him down. Mm-hmm. We're probably going to get some pressure up the middle by their defensive tackle, who's having a very quiet, good year. Mm-hmm. But J.J. Watt is going to be, every time that we've played the Texans, we've owned him.
Right.
And I think it was this season was the first time that we've played him in a while anyways, that he didn't either leave the game or was out for the game. And I do not wish that on him in this game at all. I mean, I want for him to finish the game healthy.
Right.
But for us to dominate him as often as we have, I think we can continue doing that, whether it's with Fisher or Schwartz.
I completely agree. And this is just a scenario where, look, our whole team is healthy. Besides the players that are injured reserve, everybody's practicing this week. There's really nothing to speak of on the injury report. So I look for our offensive line to slow down J.J. Watt and ultimately, take him out of the scenario, that's all we have to do, against this Texans defense, because there's no more Jadeveon Clowney, in a Texans uniform. He went off to Seattle and is doing his thing up there. So that's another focus that we don't have to put our mind on, in this all-important playoff game. And this is a scenario, look, it is the Texans. I feel like that we have a really great shot against the Texans, more so than Tennessee. Derrick Henry looks great. And that seems to be the one team that, in my mind, I really would not want to face here coming up in the playoffs. Chris, out of the teams that are left, there's quite a bit of talent left, in these playoffs. There's still Kansas City, Houston, Baltimore, and Tennessee. Let's talk about this scenario a little bit and what it means to Kansas City and, the teams that are left. How can we capitalize on, this might be one of the easier routes to the Super Bowl that the Chiefs have ever had, given there's no playoffs that are easy, but the way it's played out so far is played out in Kansas City's favor.
Yeah, absolutely. And based on the results of the wild card weekend, I don't think we could have asked for things to finish out any better than they did.
Right.
New England got beat. Although, and I will say this, I would much rather have played New England ourselves.
Right.
Because I would have loved to have been able to claim that we ended the dynasty.
Yes.
But you look at Houston, and they didn't look awful. They had a rough start against Buffalo. Mm-hmm. And then Buffalo just didn't have the second half to keep that lead. I can't believe they gave it up. And then Tennessee running all over the Patriots the way that they did. I think that they're going to create a very physical game against Baltimore. And whoever wins that game is going to come out very beat up.
Yes.
And
yes.
They're probably going to have some injuries when they play us next weekend.
Hey, and I can't argue with that a bit. And like you were saying with Watt, we don't wish that on anybody, but that's a part of football. And you put two teams that are run heavy. Look, these are hard-nosed football teams, both of them. And I'll give Mike Vrabel his credit. He's turned that Tennessee team around. He's made the changes that need to be made. And the man out-coached Belichick. I mean, to be perfectly honest with everyone in Chiefs Kingdom, when there was, 6.5 minutes left, 6 minutes left, and he took the offsides penalty, then he took the delay of game, and then, I believe the Patriots jumped off sides at one point, but when he ran the clock down all the way under 5 minutes, just off the penalties, just to take, he literally pulled a card out of Belichick's hat and outcoached him.
Yeah, it was fun to watch, and seeing Belichick get as upset as he did because he was getting out Belichicked in that moment. It was funny to watch.
It was one of the greatest accomplishments that I had literally seen of any coach against Belichick, and to see him squirm and cry to the officials, it was just fun, you know. And then I watched the post-game press conference with Belichick, and I'll tell you what, it looked like the man was almost in tears. It was great to see. I feel like that he knows, you know, as well as everybody else, that the dynasty's over. I mean, I do want to talk about this a little bit, Chris, because this is some interesting news. I've heard a lot of speculation about Tom Brady, you know, moving on, going to get his money somewhere else. But what's really, really funny about this whole scenario is all the fans that I have talked to of the prospective teams that he might sign with, nobody wants him. The fan bases do not want him. I've literally heard some fans say that they will completely switch gears away from their team until he is not in, you know, their colors, which is, to me, it boggles my mind. But at the same time, that's how much hatred everyone else in the NFL has for Tom Brady.
Yeah, and I think it's so I mirror that same those feelings toward him. However, you look at the track record of success that he's had, and he's a great quarterback.
He really is,
and he's always going to be in the discussion of the greatest quarterback of all time.
Right.
But given this year and the falling back of their offensive game, he didn't look like his old self.
Not at all.
And unlike years past, where he was able to make the wide receivers that were basically just guys off the street and make them look like all pros.
Right.
He's reaching that point in his career where he can't do that anymore.
He really can't.
And he looks human.
He does. And I will say, in this playoff game, his arm did not look as strong as it had throughout his whole career. Some throws that he made, he just can't put the same zip on the ball that he used to, and it was apparent. And that playoff game was the first time I saw that huge drop off of production, and it was really apparent. And I hate to say it, but it was nice. I loved it. I love seeing it. It's got to come to an end at some point. No matter even if he feels like he can, you know, continue playing, bring him on over to the AFC West. I don't even care. Bring him to the Chargers. I would love to send him out of the NFL with the Kansas City Chiefs completely owning Tom Brady.
Yeah, that would be fantastic to have that claim. For them to move on from Rivers to another crybaby and Brady.
Right.
And to have owned both of them could be fantastic. I will say that given his arm strength issues at this point in his career, you put him on a team like the Chargers where they have 3-4 really good options in the pass game. He could still flourish there.
I think it would be. I think that's the best fit for him.
I have to agree, because you look at all of the other teams that are going to be quarterback hungry. Most of them don't have the salary cap or the salary to pay Brady,
right?
As well as they don't have the weapons around to support him. San Diego, LA Chargers, are the only team that really have the pieces all there. They just need a quarterback who won't turn the ball over, and. The last 2 weeks aside, that's never been Brady's MO.
Right.
This past weekend and Week 17 against the Dolphins is the first time in his career that he's thrown two pick sixes.
Oh, right.
And so, I mean, yeah, we see a regression, but at the same time, a cerebral assassin like he is, as long as he still has the accuracy, he can make things happen.
Right. I completely agree. And now let me ask you this, though, because this is the whole weird scenario about all of these quarterback needy teams and teams that are obviously going to cut players loose, like Phillip Rivers. It's the AFC. I don't see Rivers or Brady leaving the AFC. It wouldn't make any sense. There's no NFC team that ultimately needs a Phillip Rivers or a Tom Brady this coming up season. So I think it's going to be a really cool change of pace and change of gears to see these quarterbacks kind of dissipate off into other teams within the AFC. Would you agree with me? I mean, do you feel like both of these, Rivers and Brady, are going to stay in the AFC?
I'm looking at the NFC, or thinking about the NFC teams that might be looking for a quarterback, and there really are very few of them that would be looking for a potential replacement for their starters this year.
Right.
There are two names that jump out to me. Mm-hmm. One of them doesn't make a lot of sense. The other one, it's kind of growing on me a little bit. So the one that doesn't make a lot of sense would be Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Right.
Because, well, it doesn't seem like a logistical fit. However, the other team in that same division, the NFC South, the Carolina Panthers.
Right. Ooh.
If they were to move on from Cam Newton,
mm-hmm.
they'll be able to bring in Brady and have whichever quarterback that they want to be the quarterback of the future sit and learn behind Brady for a year, maybe two, until he reaches his golden age of 45.
Mm-hmm.
And when he retires, and then that quarterback can then step in and show what he's learned from Brady.
Right. It's going to be interesting, and there's okay. Let's look at this scenario with the Panthers, because the Panthers just signed, who's that, Matt Rule?
Yeah. To
a $62 million deal with $10 million in incentives. They paid off Baylor $6 million. So, they're really deep into Matt Rule and have a lot of faith in him. Is this a coach that you could legitimately see Brady being all in on at the end of his career?
To be perfectly honest, no. But it would also depend on the other weapons that they bring in and
right.
the other coaches that they have on the staff.
Right.
I don't believe they've announced who their OC is going to be yet. But if I'm Brady and I'm looking at the Panthers and I'm looking at that roster, and I've got DJ Moore that I can throw the ball to. I don't remember their other wide receiver. And then their scat back, because there's really no other way to frame it, and McCaffrey, who is probably the best running back that Brady will ever play with.
Right. Wow.
And this kid had a 1,000-yard rushing, 1,000-yard receiving year. Imagine how many more yards receiving he would have with Brady.
Gosh, and that's one of those scenarios that it could get really scary down there in Carolina if they brought him on and went and got another receiver. Now, I wouldn't mind seeing him go to the NFC. I wouldn't mind seeing him stay in the AFC. Here's another interesting prospect. And this one, by good faith, I couldn't see them signing him because of the Peyton Manning, Tom Brady rivalry. But Indianapolis, the Colts are another team that are looking for a quarterback. Jacoby Brissett started out the season, hot. He obviously beat the Chiefs. Justin Houston had a big part to do with that too. But you look at that dynamic of the whole history of Brady and Manning and the Colts. Do you think that's even a realistic scenario for the Colts to even bat an eye at?
Honestly, I don't think so, because they signed Brissett to an extension earlier this year,
mm-hmm.
and they made a rather hefty signing as well. And then you also look at the receiving weapons that they carry. All of those guys are getting old, and they need to reload in their passing game I don't think that that's going to be a good location for Brady to go to.
I agree with you on the receiving core. T.Y. Hilton is no longer a number one receiving threat in my mind.
Yeah. And I mean, he would be able to step in and have an amazing offensive line in front of him. So he would probably have all day to throw the ball.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't really mean a whole lot if your receivers can't get open and they can't catch the ball.
Right. So we have about 5 prospects, that Tom Brady could really end up at. L.A. seems like the perfect fit. So Tom Brady goes to Los Angeles, plays for the Chargers. Let's just say that's hypothetically what happens. Where's Rivers going?
Rivers is probably going to try to stay on the AFC or on the West Coast, just so that he can stay close to his family, which is at this point I think up to an entire soccer team in numbers. But I could see him going to Tampa Bay and slinging it out there to Mike Evans, and I think that would be an ideal location for him because it's going to have similar climate.
Mm-hmm.
And in the NFC South, I mean, none of those squads other than Carolina do you ever really have to worry about the cold elements out there.
Right.
Tampa Bay's going to be warm. The Saints and Falcons play in a dome. I think it would be a very good change for Rivers to go there.
And, Tampa Bay probably has about as close to a mirror image of the offense as, the L.A. Chargers have ran in recent history. And, like you said, he's got Mike Evans out there. There's some playmakers. I feel like Tampa Bay would have been a lot better team if they had a quarterback that, wasn't the only quarterback in NFL history to throw 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions in the same season. So when you look at that aspect, I think Tampa Bay is a quarterback away from, I don't want to say being a legit contender, but you put Phillip Rivers out there, you might turn some heads.
Yeah, I mean, on offense, you bring in a quarterback that protects the ball.
Right.
Granted, Rivers hasn't necessarily been that guy his entire career. He throws turnovers, but he's never been the 30-30 club.
There's only one of those.
That's going to be Winston all on his own there for a good while.
Yes.
But Tampa Bay let's say Tampa Bay brings him in, they only have to focus on their defense from that point on. And, you bring in some free agents, you bring in some key draft picks, they could turn that around and be a playoff contender.
Now, and you're right about that. There's a few teams down there in Florida that could really use the presence of a new quarterback. What about Miami? What do you think about Miami as a possible landing destination for a new quarterback?
Are you trying to get rid of Fitzmagic?
I mean,
and all of the wonderful things that he has done for us?
I mean, no, not personally, but you can't have your best asset at quarterback only play 4 games a year.
Well, that's true.
So
I think what they're going to end up doing is looking at drafting a quarterback early on in the draft and have him sit behind and Fitz for a year. I think Rosen is basically done.
Right.
I really see no way for him to be a starter the rest of his career.
I don't even think he'll be a backup anywhere. That would be a desperation move for any NFL franchise.
Yeah. Well, and there's going to be teams out there that are going to be quarterback hungry. I mean, Bengals are going to take Joe Burrow, but they could use another veteran presence in their quarterback room. You got he already played for the Cardinals. I mean, there's going to be a lot of open second and third string positions open for quarterbacks this year. It's going to be interesting to see where this quarterback merry-go-round ends up going because it feels like an entire third of the NFL this year, their quarterbacks, all of their contracts are up.
Right. This is going to be one of the most interesting off seasons, and my recent memory, as far as, like you said, the transition of the elite quarterbacks. You know, the quarterbacks that are running out of time, all moving to different places. There's talent all over the NFL. There's coaching changes. It's a really interesting time in the NFL, and it just seems like, you know, like the top teams. Let's talk about these playoff teams. These top teams, they're staying elite. You know, the middle of the pack teams are staying at the middle of the pack. The teams that, you know, are usually at the bottom of the barrel are still at the bottom of the barrel. And I feel like with the mix-up of what's going to happen this offseason, that might change the whole dynamic of everything.
Well, given the head coaching debacle that came out today,
Right.
I don't see it changing next year. I think it's going to take a little while for the pendulum to sway back the other way and make things a little more interesting. But while we're on that note, one guy who I think is going to be very interesting to see where he goes is Marcus Mariota. My reason for saying that is, at this point, we know what he is as a starter. He's never going to be a starter again.
Right.
Unless he gets hooked up with a coach who is a quarterback whisperer. And we just happen to have one on our squad. And I'm not sure how long Chad Henne is under contract for. I'm pretty sure that Matt Moore is basically done after this year. Thank you for your service, man. Really appreciate what you did for our team.
Absolutely.
But I think we bring in a Marcus Mariota, let Reed work his magic with him, and then in the preseason, first 6 weeks, a starter goes down for somebody, let's say like Jacksonville. Then we have a draft commodity there that we could end up getting a third, fourth rounder for.
Right.
That will just help us out in the future, because we know how Brett Veach is with draft picks. He's fantastic.
And he really is. And hey, I wanted to be a little bit more clear about what I was saying about, you know, the shift in transition. I guess what I should have said is there's going to be some middle of the pack or bottom of the barrel teams that is going to get lifted up into the ranks of possibly elite just from the switch of some of these quarterbacks, you know, that are nearing the end of their career. But I really think that you put Brady or Rivers, you know, and Tampa, you put them, you know, any of the prospects that we have talked about, that will lift them where they need to be. Tampa is real close to being a contender. And it's, and that's why I think it's exciting, is to get some of these guys out of these, you know, just get the Patriots out of there for a little bit, you know, let's mix that up. That alone, that changes the whole division. That opens things up for Buffalo. That opens things up for every single team in that division, and that's huge. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I think if Brady leaves, New England's going to fall back to probably third in their division. I think Bills end up winning the division with the Jets being a very close second, and then Miami and the Patriots will be battling for third and fourth.
Which will be great. I love to see the Patriots fall completely off. So, okay, let's switch gears here a little bit, because there was a lot of coaching changes happening the last few days. Obviously, you know, we know what happened in Washington with Rivera, and I'll tell you what, if things hold true the way they have been with the ownership there, it's going to be the same old story. I feel like that Rivera might be set up for failure, and I know from watching the press conference that is going to be a very much head coach controlled organization, but we all know how that goes.
Yeah, I find it very difficult for Snyder to finally, after so long, be willing to take his hands off the reins and to let his head coach the team. However, I think, I mean, for him to have brought in Ron Rivera, a coach that I truly respect, for him to bring him in, I think that he would have had to have agreed to give up his meddling in the team.
Right.
And what also really struck me was that he brought in, and I believe it's Del Rio, to be the defensive coordinator.
Right. Yes.
And that's going to be tremendous and really help to turn around that team. I want to say the sky's the limit for those guys, but if Dan Snyder truly does step back the way that Jerry Jones needs to in Dallas, I think that both of those teams would be able to flourish better when they let the experts own their realm.
Right. And that's the thing is, can they take the claws out long enough to let their franchise be successful? That's the $1 million question. And
I think it's going to be harder for Jerry Jones to do that.
Right.
But when you have a guy like Mike McCarthy, I wish him the best, but I don't think that he is strong enough to keep Jerry Jones down, although that may have been part of the agreement and the arrangement that they had behind closed doors.
I feel like Mike McCarthy is just another pawn because he didn't have any control in Green Bay. That was all Aaron Rodgers. And once Aaron Rodgers wanted him gone, he was gone. This is the same scenario with Jerry Jones. This is Jerry Jones' team. Look, Jerry Jones is the owner, the GM. He's the coach. He might as well be the starting quarterback. And I feel like that's the approach that Jerry Jones takes. Is he's got to have his hands in everything, and that's every bit of Washington's front office as well. So, both of those scenarios, two new coaches in that division and a division that is terrible, the bottom of the barrel in the NFL. And I don't see it getting any better right away. I feel like that the Cowboys have more of a shot because they're a more well-rounded team. I'm not exactly sold on Washington's quarterback. What's his name?
Haskins?
Yes, Dwayne Haskins. I'm not sold on him. I also think that he might have been pushed into a scenario too soon with that team, the way he wasn't ready. We'll just say Rivera's got a ton of work to do. McCarthy might as well sit on your hands and ride it out there because, as long as Jerry's in the front office, it's his team. Yeah,
well, and another thing to also bring up about the Cowboys roster, although they do have probably one of the better rosters top to bottom, they have 24 players who are going to be free agents this offseason. They can't re-sign everybody, and they have to make a decision about Amari Cooper and Dak Prescott.
Those are huge. Okay, so I will say Amari Cooper surprised me in Dallas. Amari Cooper went to Dallas and became the receiver that everyone thought that he was. Now, is he worth investing into the future, and does Dak Prescott feel comfortable having him as his number one receiver? Because, as it stands right now, there's not really a whole lot of help there at the receiver position. It's Amari Cooper, and, I don't even know who their number two receiver is.
Michael Gallup is in his second year, and he's actually been coming on pretty strong, and especially in away games where Amari Cooper disappears.
Okay.
Amari Cooper apparently only shows up for home games. Michael Gallup's been a little bit more consistent all season long. Jason Witten is probably going to be riding out into the sunset again.
He's going to be a coach.
Yeah. I'd say take a year away from the game and then come back as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that they need to find a tight end that will complement Dak, which now that Witten's gone, they need to find somebody because they just don't have it on the roster.
Right.
And, with the trio that they have at wide receiver in Cooper, Gallup, and Cobb, they were pretty decent this year. I just would like to see them get an upgrade at the wide receiver slot. I don't think that Amari Cooper is consistent enough to warrant the type of money that he's going to be commanding this offseason.
I completely agree, and he's shown that throughout his entire career. He's had so much promise, and he just reminds me of a Michael Crabtree. Just, he was good but not great.
Yeah, never really developed into that next tier wide receiver.
Yes.
That they always seemed like they were going to.
Right. So, okay, let's stay in this division because, look, we're talking about a division that's going to have 3 new head coaches in it. And so the Giants hire their next head coach. Chris, go ahead and talk about what the Giants went out and did because, let's be honest, it's the same old Giants, and I'm floored by what they went and did.
Yeah, I couldn't believe this either. The Giants went out and hired Joe Judge, who is the Joe Judge.
Who?
He is the wide receiver coach and special teams coordinator from the New England Patriots.
Right. Now, I will say that, you spend years under a Belichick-led system, and then before that, he was with Nick Saban for about 7 seasons. He really has a decent resume as far as the coaching tree that he is under. But is he ready to really take the reins as a head coach coming from the position that he was at? I'm not seeing this. This looks like the biggest shot in the dark that Gettleman could go do, or ownership. I'm not sold on this. I'm not sold on Rule of the Panthers either. There's some really weird moves made today.
Yeah, and this is probably my biggest question mark because he was a wide receiver coach this year. First time that he's been a wide receiver coach.
Yep.
And what do the Patriots wide receivers do for this year?
Nothing.
I mean, they basically did. They were not the strength of that offense.
No. I mean, really, I don't hate to say this, but that was just a declining offense all season long. They started off all right, but they declined all the way through the season. And I'll tell you, when it was towards the end of the season, Tom Brady looked tired. Tom Brady did not have the same arm. You can tell his arm is tired. Their running game, I mean, I don't want to say it's non-existent, but it's not really that great. So this is an offense that needs completely rebuilt. But we're not talking. Listen, we're talking about the Giants. Sorry, I'm getting away from things here. The Giants just making mistake after mistake after mistake. I'm not seeing Joe Judge as the answer. This is a desperation move there, and if you're going to be desperate, go make a desperate move and pick up somebody who has some sort of background in head coaching. I mean, anybody.
I mean, there's plenty of coaches out there who have head coaching experience and are strong on either side of the ball.
I mean, if you're going to...
There's only one...
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll say, if you're going to go out and you're going to hire a coach from the Patriots coaching staff named Joe Judge, let me ask you this. Why didn't... You named a prospect that could possibly go to the Browns, and I'm going to let you announce this prospect, but I want to know why the Giants did not go after him.
So Josh McDaniels would have been the better hire.
Yes.
Here, with the Giants.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the offensive coordinator. He has head coaching experience in Denver, albeit it wasn't that great of a tenure there. Mm-hmm. But I think that he's probably going to end up going to the Cleveland Browns, who at this point are the only remaining head coaching opening. And it makes sense for Josh Daniels to go there. But the reason why the Giants jumped on this guy, Joe Judge, instead of McDaniels, is that Joe Judge was rumored to be offered the head coaching position at his alma mater. I believe it's Mississippi State.
Gotcha. That would have been a great fit for him.
They didn't want to lose out on the opportunity to get the next Bill Parcells, the next Bill Belichick.
Right.
They wanted to bring this guy in and give him his shot, and hopefully they're patient enough with him to not just give him 1 year, because that wouldn't really be very fair to him. But then again, I mean, it's the NFL. It's what have you done for me lately, league, and I mean, if they end up 4-12 again,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that he can keep his job. He needs to show improvement in some aspect of the team.
Yes.
And as a first-year head coach, as we saw with Freddie Kitchens in Cleveland, you're going to come across struggles that you're not used to dealing with.
Right.
And you're going to either get in there and figure it out, or you're going to throw your hands up and say, I surrender. And for such a young guy who's never really had the offense or the defense in his grasp, I think it's going to be really difficult for the Giants to truly make this hiring work.
He's never been an NFL head coach, and I know everybody has to have their chance, but I look at this as too big of a platform for Joe Judge. Number one, this is New York. Okay, we're talking about New York. These fans are relentless. They don't care about you. All they want to do is win. And the pressure from the fans in New York is a great is a great indication of which way that franchise ultimately turns, because those fans are ruthless, and there's a lot of them. And I just look at this as too big of a platform for Joe Judge. I don't. This is going to be another one and done for the Giants. I mean, how many head coaches they had in the last 5 seasons? 4. This is going to be their 5th one in 6 seasons. And this could, I really think, if he doesn't shine immediately, he's going to be out the door.
Yeah, I have to agree there. There's really no other way to look at it. And you with this franchise, you've got a young quarterback who needs to develop.
Right.
And I don't see him being the guy. Now, if they bring in an offensive coordinator who's an absolute guru, great. But if you have to bring in a strong offensive and a strong defensive coordinators to offset what you're getting in your head coach, that's not the right way to go about it.
Right.
I feel like Joe Judge should have been hired as a coordinator.
Right.
With the potential to step in as the head coach when that other head coach ends up moving on.
I completely agree. Now, and I want to ask you this, and we're going to keep this brief because I want to get back to the AFC side of things, and we also still have to touch base on the Panthers. Who's winning that division next year? And, this is a gut check call, and I realize this. There's way too many variables that are going to go into it. But this is the most flip-flopped division, and they've gone through the most changes. Who's winning this division next season?
Well, as you just touched on, with all of the changes that are set to be happening in this division, I've got to go with Philadelphia is going to win it.
Absolutely.
Simply because they're going to have the consistency.
Right.
And Peterson is going to be able to, A, get healthy on his roster, and B, add more pieces and get younger at wide receiver.
I couldn't agree more. And it's just a scenario where it makes sense. That's a perfect fit, and I can't really lean in any other direction. You nailed it on that one. So let's touch base a little bit on, Matt Rule and the Panthers. I mean, we'll keep that real brief because we have talked about it a little bit, but what do you think of that signing as well?
I think Carolina definitely got their guy. For whatever reason, they interviewed several coordinators and head coaches for the head coaching position, and Rule ended up being the guy that they wanted. I mean, you look at the contract that he got,
yes,
and all of the incentives and other money that was spent on him. He was their guy. They
wanted him. They didn't care what they had to spend. They wanted Matt Rule.
Yeah, they basically pulled a Mike Ditka, trading your entire draft for Ricky Williams. That's basically what they did here. Is just they went all in on this coach.
Yes, and I mean
what was the length of the contract? 6-7 years.
7 years, $62 million with $10 million in incentives, and they paid off $6 million to Baylor to buy out his contract.
Yeah, that's just ridiculous.
It is. It's flat out ridiculous.
And there's still a lot of question marks there as to what exactly is going to happen with the quarterback position. Does he keep Cam Newton now?
Right.
Does he let Cam Newton go? Do they bring in, or does he bring in his own guy?
They're going to let him walk. I feel like they're going to let him walk.
Yeah, I don't know. Having watched the bowl game last week with Baylor, the style of play from his quarterback at Baylor didn't seem the same as Cam Newton.
Right.
And Cam Newton has essentially been the same quarterback that he was at Auburn and here in Carolina. I haven't seen him necessarily change his ways. And I think that in order to play in Matt Rule's offense, you're going to have to make that switch. And if not, he's going to let you go.
Absolutely. And I've got to ask you, and this would be a big move. Where do you see a player like Cam Newton falling?
Well, there's going to be a lot of quarterback needy teams.
What if he went to New England?
That doesn't seem like a good fit. I could see him actually going to Miami.
Wow. Gosh, would he really want to do that? Now, what if Jameis Winston's on his way out the door? But I guess you were saying that's a good fit for Rivers. There's so many variables. This is going to be a great offseason. There's a number of teams that could use him. I mean, I would even go as far as say Chicago might want to bust a move.
Oh, absolutely. That would be another great hire by them.
So let's get back to the AFC side of things. And, I want to touch base on one thing. Cleveland has not found their coach yet. I really think the best fit that, in my mind, it would have been Ron Rivera in Cleveland. Obviously, he went to Washington. It's still open. McDaniels could possibly go there. That's another team in shambles. But I will tell you this. You get the right coach in that organization, it's over.
Yeah, absolutely. The Browns have too much talent on their team to be this bad.
I completely agree. And that was all coaching. And you could tell, look, I feel like Baker Mayfield was a victim of bad coaching.
Bad coaching, bad offensive line. I think that John Dorsey definitely got the short end of the straw there.
Right.
I don't know what the heck the owner is trying to do and what direction he's trying to take them. Because you have a GM who is bringing in talent.
Yes.
And he made a bad hire, and he made that admittance, and he was willing to move on and try somebody else. And then a few days later, you go and you fire the GM.
That brought in more talent.
The owner had said.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry. I believe that the owner had said that the next head coach is going to have his hands on whether or not the GM stays or goes. And in my mind, that makes absolutely no sense.
At all. To
have the head coach determine who the GM is.
Yeah, so that's
ridiculous.
To me, that takes out the pecking order. That tells me that it goes from the owner to the head coach to the GM. And that is completely backwards. That's not how you can run a franchise. And somebody needs to fix that front office. I mean, that's all there is to it. The higher ups there, like you said in Cleveland, they don't know what they're doing. It's obvious. It's completely apparent. They don't know what they're doing. They need to get somebody in there who does. So let's talk about some important things because, look, we are in the midst of the playoffs, and these are all things that are really going to take an effect next season. They're not going to have any bearing on what's going on between Kansas City, Houston, Baltimore, Tennessee, San Francisco, Minnesota, and Green Bay, Seattle. So let's touch base on the AFC side, and then we'll touch base on the NFC side, and then we'll end the show for this evening. I don't want to really hone in on Kansas City and Houston yet because I want to save that for the pregame show. But I want to ask you, out of all the teams that are left, what's the biggest threat to Kansas City in the AFC?
In the AFC, I definitely have to say Tennessee is. And they really are the team that I want to see in the championship week. We've beaten Baltimore, and I feel like we've gotten better as the year has gone on. Mm-hmm. Whereas Baltimore has basically stayed the same. we knew who they were in the beginning of the year. They've remained that same team.
Right.
Tennessee, on the other hand, we have a grudge against them.
For sure. Yes, absolutely.
And Derrick Henry is an absolute monster at running back.
Yes.
And I think that if we end up having to stack the box to try to shut him down, it's going to open up things in the passing game like it did the last time for them. And as we saw, Tannehill has been absolutely on fire these last 6-7 games. And they scare me more so than Baltimore, and definitely more so than Houston.
And I agree with you.
Tennessee is going to bring a physical aspect to the game that, as we saw earlier in the year, and granted, like, we were banged up at the time, but they bring a physicalness to the game that we just can't match.
I feel like I'm watching Eddie George. You know, when I watch Derrick Henry, he is just relentless, and that's the way Eddie George was, a power runner, fast, huge. You couldn't slow him down. And that's going to be a huge test for the Chiefs. But I'll tell you this. I'll say this right now. If we face Tennessee in the AFC Championship game and we shut down Derrick Henry and we move on to the Super Bowl, there is no NFC team that's going to touch us.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the NFC side real quick, because I feel like one of the biggest threats for the Chiefs got knocked out, by the Vikings, and that was a huge deal to see the Saints walk away in the wild card round. So we're sitting here looking at a Green Bay team that I don't believe in. I always fear Seattle because, I mean, let's face it, their quarterback is about as close to Patrick Mahomes as it gets. He's an animal. San Francisco, all around biggest threat. Minnesota, God, please let Minnesota make it to the Super Bowl. Like, let Minnesota make it to the Super Bowl and let Kansas City run all over them and have a rematch of the only Super Bowl that Kansas City's ever won.
Yeah.
So,
I would love to see either Minnesota or San Fran in that Super Bowl. San Fran, I think, is going to be the most interesting matchup.
right.
And the most challenging matchup, whereas if we face Minnesota, like you said, that'll be an easy win, but it'll also be a rather nostalgic game to be able to play against the team that we won our only other Super Bowl against.
I completely agree. I feel like if we play San Francisco, we shut down Jimmy Garoppolo, we'll be all right. No defense can stop the Chiefs. We usually beat ourselves in that sense. Green Bay, obviously Aaron Rodgers. I look for Green Bay to beat Seattle. I look for San Francisco to beat Minnesota. Then I look for San Francisco to beat, who'd I say, Green Bay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I look for San Francisco to beat Green Bay. And like you said, I feel like we're going to play. It's going to be Baltimore, Tennessee, obviously. That's the only two that we can play. But I feel like the Chiefs are just going to get it done. But we can't look past Houston. This is a huge game. Houston is not a slump or a slouch, and we really have to focus and hone in on that. But also with Andy Reid having a bye week, I really think the Chiefs are going to be all right in the divisional round, especially at home.
Yeah, and the other benefit that we have is that we've already seen them once.
Yes, exactly. And we're a different team.
And when we played them, yeah, both of us were different teams at the time, but we had more pieces out and missing and injured. Or they were only missing 2 critical players.
Right.
And so for the most part, we know who they are.
Yes,
Or
absolutely.
they haven't really necessarily seen us. And they had their top defender in that game when we played them, and we were able to shut down J.J. Watt.
Yep, and we shut and legitly every time we played them, even when Jadeveon Clowney was on their team, we shut both of them down every time we played them. The last time those two together, I believe we shut them out 30-0 in the playoffs. So it's okay. We've touched base on a lot. We've covered a lot of ground tonight. There's 4 important games coming up this weekend. Kansas City, Houston, Sunday, 3:05 p.m. That's Eastern time, so it'll be 2:05 Arrowhead time, and the game is at Arrowhead. Huge game. Everybody get out there, support your team. I know it's going to be packed house. There better not be one Texas fan in the whole house. Chris, is there anything else you'd like to add to the show tonight before we cut Kansas City loose and, get back to our night and prepare for this pregame show?
No, I'm going to save everything else for the pregame show.
Perfect. That sounds great. Well, Chris, look, like I said, we covered a lot. There's a lot of coaching changes today, in this past week. With the playoffs, a lot of quarterback moves are going to happen. Things are shaking up in the NFL, and it's a lot of fun. I'm sure there'll be more to come as the week, plays out. And I'm interested to see how, what happens. But Chris, man, I appreciate you as always. I love talking football with you, and I know Kansas City loves hearing your outlook on things as well.
Likewise, thank you as always for having me on.
Perfect. Well, Kansas City, that is the show tonight. We are going to let you think about all this, and we'll get back to you. I assume, Friday or Saturday at some point, and we'll talk about this huge matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Houston Texans. We're in the playoffs again, Kansas City. We got our first round bye. Now we got to take care of business because obviously our end goal is a Super Bowl. We obviously want to end up in that scenario, and one game at a time. We can't look past Houston. So have a great week, Kansas City. This is Kingdom Radio. I am your host, Richard Smith, along with my co-host and senior NFL analyst, Chris Chavez, bringing you the latest Chiefs news. Thank you for being with us. Have a great evening, Kansas City.
Thank you for tuning in to Kingdom Radio, your go-to podcast for everything Kansas City Chiefs.
Hey there, music lover. Whether you're hosting a party or just trying to relax, you always know exactly what song to play. So we created Xfinity XFi so you can stream music throughout your whole home. This is beyond Wi-Fi. This is XFi. Tap the banner to learn more.
A routine is a good thing to have. And sometimes a routine is a good thing to break. Take a break with McDonald's $1, $2, $3 menu. Get a tasty sausage McMuffin for $1 and add any size coffee or soft drink like Dr. Pepper for $1 more. Because if you don't deserve a morning that's a little easier and a lot tastier, who does? Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with combo meal.